In the winter of 1900, Northerners with money, tired of the cold and the cinder-covered streets, were heading south. It's against the policy of Americans, one railroad man said, to remain locked up by ice one half of the year.
This is the first time that people can travel overland quickly and easily. Within a person's lifetime, they've gone from the days when having to travel to the next town was a hard slog over terribly hard roads. Now, for heaven's sakes, they can travel in an hour on a train.
Men and women who had taken 6 months to cross the country in covered wagons now made the trip in 6 days. And they could take a vacation anywhere on the continent. One guidebook recommended winter stations in the Carolinas, Florida, even California, for those afflicted with consumption, gout, rheumatism, or chronic bronchitis. That someone from Buffalo or Detroit could enjoy the sun in Florida during the winter seemed to defy nature itself.
I don't think you can exaggerate how much change was in the air for people. Things that had been around, conditions that had been taken for granted since time immemorial had changed. The scientific, technological, industrial revolution of that time was something absolutely unprecedented in human history.
In 1900, Americans were dazzled by the onrush of inventions. Machines that could peer inside the human body were revolutionizing medicine. Autos were promising to replace horses. There was even a dollhouse for sale with its own electric doorbell and electric lights no bigger than a pea. Americans believed that the inventions of the day were going to make them smarter, happier, healthier. Even popular music celebrated the breakthroughs.
The turn of the century, particularly in America, represented a period that will someday be compared to the Renaissance. Within a period of a very short time, 15, 20 years, most of the breakthroughs in technology occurred that now influence our lives so heavily. Everything since then has been engineering. You capture motion. Motion picture comes about this time. Now, everything since is engineering. It's technology. Sure, the picture's better. But the idea of seeing people move on a screen is new. The telephone. Hello? I'm talking to Chicago. A miracle. But we take it for granted. You break through and record sound. It's gotten better, but everything since is simply engineering. Do you realize that when the phonograph broke through, just prior to 1900, that there were touring groups that went out with an old cylinder phonograph and the horn that you yelled into and the little mica diaphragm that transcribed, and they'd go to a town and they'd rent a hall, and people would come and they'd play the phonograph and there'd be a dog barking. and people would applaud. And then the leading citizens of the town would come up. The mayor would come up. And they'd instruct him, and he would say, "Hello?" And they'd play it back, "Hello?" And people would applaud. The electric light, for heaven's sake. Electric current. The breakthroughs were considered miraculous.
Most people in 1900 can remember a time, a very recent time, when most of the things you did in your life were hard work, dirty, and disorganized. There's still a good bit of that around, as a matter of fact, but all around them, particularly in cities, there begin to be amazing things, amazingly precise, well-engineered systems that are beginning to transform a dirty, messy world. Plumbing. You have to be still fairly well-to-do to have plumbing, but it's around, and you know that that's sort of coming. There are a lot of things like that that are sort of right around the corner even for people like you. You can see them around you, and you know that after a while, you'll have them too. The promise that you will have electric lights, and maybe you even have one already, a bulb hanging in your house. Or maybe you even have a hot plate that you plug in, just a little one, but maybe you have one already. This is a hot plate better than a great big, robust iron stove, which is a pretty mature technology, a cook stove? No, it doesn't cook nearly as well, but the future. Oh.
In 1900, while Americans were dreaming of the future, the world around them was changing, leaving a troubling undercurrent of anxiety and doubt.
No place on the face of the earth in the history of the world had ever changed as fast as 19th century America. And I think Americans felt the whole floor underneath them had given way. Technology seems almost a spontaneous force with a power and life of its own. What it bred, I think, more than anything, is a sense of anxiety. And a lot of people felt they had lost their moorings, literally.
If I'm the ordinary guy in 1900, I am mostly optimistic, but I'm pretty intimidated, too, by these ever-increasingly complex systems that are turning up all around me. I am surrounded now by systems that make me an idiot because I do not know how they work, nor do I know how to fix them, nor do I even know how they made them in the first place. Electricity isn't like a steam engine. You can watch a steam engine work and you can figure it all out. You watch the piston, you watch the flywheel. Not so with electricity. And so this feeling of being made small as an adult in the face of systems that transcend your intelligence, this is a hard thing. It's a price tag for progress.
Nowhere in America was progress more striking than in San Francisco. 50 years before, when prospectors arrived heading for the gold fields, there were just 82 houses, a few scattered tents, and miles of all but impassable sand dunes. Now, at the turn of the century, 350,000 people lived here. San Francisco had become one of the country's most cosmopolitan cities, attracting writers, artists, and bohemians. 15,000 Chinese, many brought in to work on the railroads, now made their homes here, crowded into an Asian ghetto, an entire city within a city. In 1900, San Francisco was booming. In 1900, San Francisco was booming. But like so many other cities that had sprung out of nowhere, it had been built at a price. For decades, the demand for lumber had been consuming the nation's forests. By 1900, half of the original forest had been cut. The great black walnut tree had all but disappeared. And the giant redwoods, standing for centuries before the Republic was born, were under threat.
We had been blessed on this continent with the finest natural resources of any country in the history of the world. Rich forests, the finest forests in the world, and we just had so much of it. It seemed like it was infinite. So if a forest was cut down, that's okay. There was always a new forest over the horizon. But for the first time, we started to get a sense that that may not be true, that the resources were finite. Around the turn of the century, we start to see a questioning of progress as it has been conventionally understood, starting to see the limits of progress and that it is not an unalloyed good, that in the course of this road toward progress, maybe we've lost some things that we need to retrieve now.
In January 1900, a 61-year-old Scottish immigrant living 15 miles south of San Francisco was writing a book to warn Americans that already too much had been lost and to celebrate what still remained. For John Muir, the wilderness was sacred. The forests of America, Muir wrote that year, however slighted by man, must have been a great delight to God. They were the best he ever planted. The whole continent was a garden, and from the beginning it seemed to be favored above all other wild parks and gardens of the globe.
The thing to realize about Johnny Muir is he was not like you and me. He was different. He was a pantheist, a pagan, if you will. And when he goes out there into the woods, he talks to the woods and the rocks and the birds, and he thinks they talk back to him. He believed that all forms of life, and rocks too, have souls. And in that belief, he steps outside the Christian tradition. Christians believe that only humans have soul, only humans go to heaven. Well, Muir said that the Christian heaven was stingy. He thought everything was divine, everything is holy, and therefore everything should be respected and protected.
In 1900, a wilderness craze was sweeping the country. Hiking and mountaineering were in fashion. The Audubon Society and the Sierra Club had recently been formed. People were fleeing the cities, heading for the great outdoors.
There was a widespread turning to nature right around 1900. And a lot of people in cities decided that they had lost something and they wanted to get it back. And this is the real wilderness. This is packing and camping overnight and climbing serious mountains.
For the first time, people began talking about conservation. Muir saw in the Back to Nature craze tropes for his campaign to preserve the wilderness. Even the scenery habit in its most artificial forms, he wrote, mixed with spectacles, silliness, and Kodaks. Its devotees arrayed more gorgeously than scarlet tanagers. Even this is encouraging and may well be a hopeful sign of the times.
He saw the good side of things and was an optimistic fellow, and so he found grounds for hope. And that's the spirit of the age. But actually, there were grounds for hope.
In 1900, America could boast of 5 national parks. There were still millions of acres of untouched wilderness. And the environmental movement Muir championed began to find support in Washington. That year, Congress, for the first time ever, passed legislation to protect wildlife in danger of extinction. And the Senate finally moved to protect the buffalo. There were only 400 left on the entire continent. John Muir said he wanted to do something for wildness and make the mountains glad. The little book he began in 1900 would remain in print throughout the 20th century, inspiring generations of Americans with his love of the natural world.